the CSS layout, the XML, XHTML, and validating your page, accessibility, and then more stuff about layout. I don't know, I just sort of play it by ear, and whatever seems right, I do it that way. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about accessibility on websites. It's a topic that I think was introduced on the very first one, the very first lab. You asked to find some resources about it. And your next lab, you're to go into more detail about accessibility. And I think it's good. The reason I assign some of these labs is that encourages you to go out and investigate these topics in more detail on your own. All right, but I do think it's I do also have something to say on these topics. I don't solely want you to go and investigate on your own. So I'm going to spend some time talking about them. It's especially important because in my mind, accessibility is one of those topics that, how can I say this, doesn't get the attention that it deserves. Even some fairly experienced web developers don't really completely understand it. They may understand it partially, they may not understand it really much at all. And in our textbook, I don't think there's adequate treatment in either of the two textbooks about accessibility. There's some mentions here and there, but I don't think it gets the focus that it deserves. So I have a separate unit for it, and I have some materials about it. And first thing I'm going to do is we're going to browse the materials that are available, and then we're going to start the discussion on accessibility. This should take today and maybe part of Monday. Maybe not, I don't know, we'll see how it goes. After that, we'll start working on creating layouts that are a little more flexible. The first set of layouts that we did were pretty rigid. We started, I think, with the second example or we might even back out on that one. But the next layouts that we'll do will be layouts that are more flexible so that they move more with the screen. The layouts that we did last time were very fixed. So the next topic after this will be to talk about how we can make our layouts a little more flexible. At any rate, let's look in Angel. By the way, I can't let this pass. You will get such a deduction if you have a star blinking on your page on anything but like maybe the first assignment or two. All right? I saw that yesterday, and that really bothered me. And I thought, well, maybe it's just that I was tired and I was cranky, and maybe that's why it bothered me. I look at it again today, and it's even worse than I remember it. So please don't do that. All right. Oh, one thing that I did mention via an announcement that I want to explicitly mention is next Monday, a person from the law firm for the alternative version of the project will be here on campus to speak to students. It will be recorded if you can't make it, but whether you're in the campus class or the online class, you're welcome to come. Probably the best thing to do would be to come here if you're in the online class, and we'll walk over there. Or you can go to UC 328 if you know where that room is. So again, I encourage anyone involved in that project to be here. If you're not able to be here and you still want to participate in the project, you can view the video recording. What I imagine will happen is the person will discuss what they want out of the site, and we'll answer questions about the site that students have. All right. In the resource section of Angel, there's a special folder for accessibility resources. And let me run down some of these items. First thing is a PowerPoint presentation that we may or may not use, or let me rephrase that. You should definitely read this. I may or may not present it in class. I probably won't. I probably will just talk about some of the same things, and you can read the details in the PowerPoint presentation on your own. In my mind, this serves for a good substitute for the fact that the textbook doesn't adequately cover it. So read through this presentation on accessibility. This resource is particularly good on the area of forms and tables. All right. In addition, there's a good pre- and post-test on this site where it asks you some questions about accessibility. You can answer them, and then after you review the material, you can take the post-test to see, to get a sense of what you've picked up from that. Access keys. One of the concepts with accessibility is if you can make things, instead of accessible by mouse click, make them accessible by a keystroke, that can improve accessibility for some people. So we will, that's something to consider. Universal usability is sort of a great little buzzword when it comes to accessibility. It's a real important concept because, and again, we'll talk about this more when I get into the presentation itself, but a lot of people have the wrong idea about making accessible websites. They think that making accessible websites will kind of compromise the quality or the content of the website. And that's not the case at all. The notion of universal accessibility is that you design for everyone. You don't design for the fully abled. You don't design for the disabled. But you design in such a way that really accommodates everyone's needs. Here's an article that talks about Target being sued for lack of accessibility on their website. That is sort of a legal gray area. It's a legal area that, like just about every legal area, I would prefer to have nothing to do with, right? And therefore, I'm going to be proactive when I develop websites and make sure that they are fully accessible. Here are some words from the W3C organization itself on accessibility, given that they are the ones that created these standards. All right. Here's a way of testing your pages to see if they're accessible, provided you've uploaded them to a web server. This relates to forms. All right. And we'll talk about forms in the second half of this class. Not today, but I mean, about week 10 or 11 of this class. Web Anywhere is a screen reader. It's a form of assistive technology. And finally, there's a color blindness test that will allow you to view what your page would look like if it's being viewed by a person that's colorblind. All right? Now, the bulk of the material, if you're going to read one of these, all right, read the accessibility PowerPoint. In addition to that, you should pay attention to this, accessibility resources, and pretty accessible forms when we get to those sections, when we get to the sections on tables and forms. I guarantee you, a lot of folks, when we get to the tables and forms section, will miss the accessibility aspects of it. And in one respect, I don't blame students because I don't think it's talked about much in the textbook, if at all. All right? But we do have these resources available, so I do expect you to pay attention to accessibility for forms. So those will be the main ones to read. The other ones give a glance over, and I think they provide good information as well. I won't be giving the PowerPoint presentation in terms of showing you slide by slide. One of the main reasons is that I like you folks too much to do that. I hate when people give PowerPoint presentations. Without naming names, I sat through recently, I'll say recently, so no one can know for sure if it was this week or last week or whatever. I sat through one of the most painful PowerPoint presentations of my life earlier. And I vowed to myself then, as I vowed since the first PowerPoint presentation I've seen that I won't subject people to this, at least not too often. So we won't be doing the PowerPoint presentation formally in the class. I'll be talking about the same material, and you should read through it because, again, it's almost like a textbook chapter on it. All right. From the first lab, you should at least have an idea of what is meant by accessibility. What does accessibility mean when we talk about in the context of websites?
Able to be, well, a website that's able to be digested by as many people as possible.
Yeah, that's a good definition. A website that's able to be used, that's usable by as many people as possible, regardless of their abilities or disabilities. All right. Accessibility specifically relates to people with disabilities. Sort of embedded in the concept of accessibility, sort of cousins of accessibility, are things such as platform compatibility and browser compatibility, right? Because they're all about inclusion, all right? It's the World Wide Web, all right? It's not the Internet Explorer Wide Web or the Windows Wide Web or the Macintosh Wide Web or the iPad Wide Web. It's the World Wide Web. And therefore, our aim is to make our stuff accessible worldwide. Well, one aspect of that is the platform and the browser compatibility, which, as we now are getting into doing more stuff with CSS, especially as far as the layout goes, will increasingly become an issue in this class. With the first so many web pages, you could almost not create browser compatibility issues if you tried, all right, because they were just so simple and so straightforward that almost nothing could go wrong with them, regardless of the browser that you were on. Now that we get into some of the more advanced CSS things, it will be possible to create browser compatibility issues because, for all the reasons that I gave before, that browser makers sometimes make mistakes, things are not implemented correctly, etc., etc. So that's one aspect of making the web universal. But another huge aspect of it is making the web accessible and usable for people with varying disabilities. Now, let me point out one of the biggest misconceptions about accessibility. Most people, or most web developers that maybe have heard of accessibility but don't really know a lot about it, think that web accessibility is only about making your website accessible to people that are blind. All right? That's not correct. That's only a part of the issue. That's not the whole issue. And really, what you'll hear a lot of people, and I've heard so many web developers say this to me, and I won't name names, but I've heard them say, yes, our website is accessible because we use alt attributes on images. Well, yeah, that's a good start. That's a step in the right direction, but that's not the whole story of accessibility. All right? Just to remind you what an alt attribute on an image is when you have an image tag, the two attributes that you always need are the source attribute to specify the file that you want to show, the file that contains the image that you want to show, and an alt attribute that gives a brief text explanation of what the image is of. That's a requirement, and those of you that are working on Lab 5 probably noticed that that's a requirement. If you tried to validate a page with an image that didn't have an alt attribute, it complained at you. It said that it's missing an alt attribute. Maybe not in that simple a language, but it probably said that if you didn't have an alt attribute. That alt text is displayed if it can't, for people that can see, it's displayed if for whatever reason it can't display the image. Like possibly that image got deleted off the web server. Or maybe your browsing has turned images off. How does this work for people that can't see, though? All right, for people that can't see, they use a tool called a screen reader. And what a screen reader is a piece of software that actually reads them the contents of their screen. All right? For images, what it does is it reads the alt attribute to them. So whatever the alt attribute is, the screen reader will read. Let me demonstrate briefly screen reader software that I believe is installed in here that I can't get to because something is hanging up here. I'll tell you what, we'll leave that to possibly Monday to review the screen reader technology. Or actually, let's see. Actually, I could maybe use this screen reader. The one that I had linked to an Angel. Of course, I have to see that star again, so that will mean another 10-minute ramp. All right, let's see if this will work in here. Web Anywhere is temporarily down as we investigate an issue regarding its abuse. Okay, unfortunately we can't test that one. We'll save that till Monday then. But really what a screen reader does is it reads the screen to you. It starts at the top of the page and it would read the title bar to you. Then it will read the text and the links. And if it's a link, it will say link, course, link, content, link, communicate, link, report. All right? For images, it reads the alt attribute to you. That, by the way, is one of the reasons why, for those of you for the first lab, I commented something to the effect of use descriptive text for links. In other words, don't say click here. Otherwise, it will say, the screen reader will say click, or link, click here. Link, click here. Link, click here. And it's virtually meaningless to anyone that is accessing the page via screen reader. It also isn't particularly useful for people that are accessing the page not using a screen reader, right? Because if there's a page that they liked on your site, if all your links say click here, it's harder for them to remember which page they actually liked. All right. At any rate, that's the alt attribute. And a lot of people, unfortunately, think that that's all you need to do to make your site accessible. And it isn't. It isn't for two reasons. All right? The first reason is that that's not the only thing that you can do for people that have vision issues. All right? There's more things that you can do. And the second reason is that blindness is only one of the variety of disabilities that can impact someone's ability to access the web. All right? In fact, the other sort of ignorant statement that you hear about web accessibility is, why should I make this much of an effort to make the site accessible? You know, after all, what percentage of the people out there are blind? All right? Again, mistaking blindness as the only disability that's relevant when it comes to websites. What are some other disabilities that may impact the ability of someone to access a website? We know blind. We got that one. That's the most obvious one. That's why people know that one. But there's other ones as well. Color blindness, exactly. If you're not careful about the combination of colors you choose, your page could look like a giant gray blob to someone that's colorblind. Or if you use colors to indicate something special, that's going to be lost on someone that's colorblind. All right? Click the red link to win $1 million. Click the green link to reformat your hard drive. All right? Well, someone that's colorblind is just going to see 2 links there. All right? Now, or, gee, these are very special instructions, so I'm going to put them in red. Someone that's colorblind isn't going to see them in red, and therefore they're not going to stand out. Now, the point is, and this is where people think, well, gee, if I'm creating an accessible website, it's going to be a boring website. Gee, because people are colorblind, does that mean I have to write all my pages so that they're black and white? Absolutely not. The notion of universal design says this, or universal usability, universal design says this. You can make a site that works well, looks good for people that are fully abled, but also works for people that have disabilities. For example, let's say I wanted to highlight some text on the page. And my original thought was to make it red. All right? Then I remembered this lecture and I said, well, wait a minute. There's some people in the world that are colorblind that can't distinguish red. All right? What would you do instead? Or what could you do instead of making the text red? Yeah, make it bold. All right? Or you could make it red and make it bold, right? Make it red and make it larger. Make it red and make it in a different font face. Make it red and what's something else we could do? Put it in italics, all right? The notion of universal usability doesn't say that we shouldn't do things just because people can't access them, but rather to supply alternate ways of getting the same information. So let's imagine I had a piece of text on a page that I wanted to be important, and I wanted it to stand out. So I make it red and make it bold. For people that are not colorblind, that's really going to stand out for them, right? It's because it's red and it's bold. All right? There's 2 indications of the fact that this content is important. And so it will really be emphasized for them. What if you can't see red? If you can't see red, it's bold. So there's a way of indicating that that is more important text, or you want to somehow direct the user's attention to that piece of text. All right? So the point is that one of the big principles with web accessibility is providing alternative presentation or content that accommodates for people's disabilities. So, when we say that we're going to develop web pages for people that are colorblind, that doesn't mean that we're going to make our pages in black and white. That means if we use color to mean something special, we're going to supply an alternative and do something else. All right? Make it italics, bold, whatever. All right? Interesting thing, by the way, is not just that people are colorblind or not, right? There's all sorts of colorblindness, all right? There's inability to see the difference, I think, between red and green, and I don't remember all the rest of them, but there's a whole series of different colorblindness. If you look at that colorblind filter, it shows you a list of maybe a half dozen different forms of colorblindness, from people that truly cannot distinguish color at all, to people that just can't tell between 2 specific colors. Is anyone in this class colorblind? All right. I always ask that just because it would be interesting to see their experiences. All right. Typically, if I'm not mistaken, usually males are colorblind more often than females, for whatever reason that is. All right. You'd have to ask a scientist that one. All right. What other disability? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, physical or neurological issues that affect their ability to use the mouse. We'll call those motor issues. I think that's typically what that's called. And these can either be physiological or neural. Someone that is paralyzed. Someone that has, what's the disease? Parkinson's disease, right, where their hands quiver a little bit. Someone, well, what are some other examples that might fit into this category? MS, absolutely.
Amputees.
Amputees, absolutely. Any others? What about some less dramatic cases of this? Pardon me? Arthritis. Right. Carpal tunnel, or what do they call those? Repetitive motion syndrome, or whatever they call that. All right. Now here's the interesting thing. All right, about this. Couple things to observe. All right. We talked about blindness. We talked about color blindness, which isn't full-fledged blindness. It's just an issue with the vision. We could add to this, and I will add to this now, just plain poor vision. All right? That's a potential accessibility issue. You know, hey, I got that one. You know, if you look at some web pages that have extremely small font, I'm sticking my face in the monitor trying to read them. All right? This is where the issue of accessibility becomes much bigger than a lot of people initially recognize. Because a lot of people, when they think of accessibility, think the extreme cases. And to be sure, yeah, those are out there and those are real. You know? So when they think of people with vision problems, they think blind people. When they think of people with motor control issues, they think of someone that's paralyzed or an amputee or whatever. The thing is, though, is for all these disabilities that exist in sort of an extreme form, they also exist, variations of them exist in much milder forms that can also be very, very troublesome when someone's trying to access the web. Now, when we add on to that an issue that probably is best described as age-related conditions, as people get older, they don't necessarily go blind, but their vision certainly gets worse. All right? They don't necessarily lose motor skills completely, but they will almost certainly have a touch of arthritis or other motor control issues. All right? So when we start really considering the full scope of accessibility, we see it's much broader than most people think of. All right? You know, if we were to ask what percentage of people are blind, there'd be a certain percentage. If we say, well, let's add on to that colorblind people, it's a bigger percentage. Let's add on to that people that just plain have bad eyesight. Well, now we're talking a much, much larger percentage. And we can do that with each one of these disabilities. Besides their extreme form, there are more milder forms, which again makes the issue of accessibility a larger issue. Now, what can we do for people with motor control issues? All right. Obviously, there are some things that that are very difficult to do. Like, how do you make it for someone as an amputee to use a computer? Well, in some cases, there are what's called assistive technology. And assistive technology would be things, either be pieces of hardware or pieces of software that are used. Stephen Hawking, for example, an extreme case of someone who has, ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, I think they formerly called it, uses something that he either controls by moving his head or moving something with his mouth. I don't remember exactly how he navigates around. It's one of those two things. So that's a case of assistive technology. When encountering disability issues, your two strategies for a person with disabilities, or the two techniques that are used to accommodate and address these issues, are, number one, assistive technologies. Things such as a screen reader, right? That's an assistive technology. That it's either a piece of hardware or a piece of software that helps people. Stephen Hawking with the thing that's controlled either through his mouth or through, through moving his hip. That's a case of assistive technology. So yes, in extreme cases, there will be assistive technology involved to assist people with that. I had a student, and I'm not sure their exact condition. It might have been MS, but they really had a hard time using the mouse. They really had a hard time navigating the mouse. What they would use is they would use an on-screen, I stand corrected. I'm confusing a couple of things. They had a hard time typing on the keyboard. They could use the mouse. What they would use, and again, I can't get to the taskbar on this stupid computer. I'll have to make a point to do that on Monday. What they would use is they would use an on-screen keyboard. All right. If you click under accessibility options on Windows, there's an on-screen keyboard that pops up. And it'll just pop up on the screen, and you can use the mouse to click the letters. Similar to like what you do on a phone or something, where you touch the letters on an on-screen keyboard there. So I'll make a point to show that on Monday. All right? So that's another example of assistive technology that can be used. The use, now those are specific pieces of technology that help people that have motor control issues. As far as universal design, one of the things that I mentioned is using access keys. For people that can have a hard time navigating the mouse, a lot of people prefer to use, key sequences to access things. And you can build that. So if you hit a certain key sequence, it goes and it does some action. All right? Follows a link or whatever. Just like there's keyboard shortcuts in regular applications, you can build keyboard shortcuts based on a web page. And you can look, there's examples of that again in the accessibility resources folder that talks about access keys.
If I'm not mistaken, they say everyone should start doing that because of the carpal tunnel or whatever. Have you heard that?
Well, I haven't heard that. It might be a bad idea. The statement was that might not be a bad idea for everyone to avoid carpal tunnel. And that might be. I don't know. I haven't particularly heard that, but sure, kind of makes sense. The problem would be that not every web page is set up to use access keys, in which case it doesn't do that. What you can do, though, typically is by tabbing around a page. If you notice as I tab around, there's a little box that follows a link, and if I hit space or enter, there I go. I go to that page. So that's one example. That's a very minor example of a keyboard shortcut, but there would be more extensive ones as well. I don't have personally, I don't have trouble so much with the mouse as I do with touch pads. I have a little touch pad on my laptop, and if I've really been spending a lot of time working on that, my hand feels like it's locked in this position for an hour afterwards, Any rate, so yeah, keyboard shortcuts are another way. What are some other things that you can do for people that have motor control issues? We talked about some extreme sort of technology, like with Stephen Hawking. We talked about access keys and keyboard shortcuts. We talked about on-screen keyboards. What are some other things that you can do? JAWS would be more. JAWS is a screen reader. That would be more people for visually impaired.
What if you were an amputee? If you couldn't quite manipulate the keyboard, but you could, see what I'm saying?
No.
If you were saying amputee to the point where you couldn't type,
Right.
but you could still use the JAWS. Well, I guess you can always read the screen. So
Right.
move.
Right.
Okay, all right.
Right. What I thought you might say is any, and I don't know if it's in JAWS or it would be another application, speech recognition would be one as well. That would be another form of assistive technology. What are some more, those are sort of more extreme cases though. What are some more mundane things that you could do to help people? Yes?
Have nothing in the content, don't have links.
Okay. One thing would be to have an appropriate amount of content on the page so that you didn't have to click around to a bunch of pages to get the full story. That's true. That's a good point. Anything else? Yes?
Anchor tags, so it's easier to navigate.
Okay, anchor tags, so maybe it's easier to navigate from page to page and not have to scroll. You can use, what he is referring to is you can actually make anchors within a page, so it's like a link, but instead of taking to another page, you can go to a different section of your page. That can help with navigation. The alternative would be to sit there and scroll, all right, for a long time. That's a good suggestion. Other suggestions? I'll give you a hint. In the spirit of universal design, not only would this help people that have carpal tunnel or arthritis, but it would also help people that are navigating your website via a phone. Yeah. What's something that you could do that would help people navigate your page, whether they had arthritis or whether they're accessing it via a phone? This is one of those that may be so simple that that it eludes you. Make your links big enough to click on. All right. It sounds dumb, but again, if your links are so tiny, then you're forcing people to find a very precise thing to click on. All right. It sounds dumb, but there are sites where you look and you have to click on a very small area. Now, here's where the notion of universal accessibility or universal design or universal usability comes in. That's a great example of something that would help someone, all right, that had carpal tunnel or had arthritis because, if I'm moving around.
That's good, but I think the padding around it, because so often
Right.
hit it and it's
Right, that's true. Give a bigger target to click on. Compare how easy it is to just click anywhere on report versus to get to the T in report, Or, as was mentioned, what if this whole area around it was, and then I could get just to here and it would be okay. Now, same thing applies if I'm browsing this via a phone. Given that I have relatively big hands, I'm always clicking on the wrong thing on some websites because the links are so small and so close together that it's difficult for me with my big fingers to go and hit the right link. So that's a case of something that would help people that have a certain disability, but also help other users as well. And that's the whole notion of universal design. You're going to do something that accommodates for people with disabilities, but you may help people in other situations regardless of whether they have that disability. And if it doesn't help people in other situations, at very least, it probably isn't going to bother them. Have you ever complained about a website because the links were too big? If you have, that's probably been very rare. All right? I can never recall a website that is like, wow, I wish these links were smaller. All right? So at the worst case scenario, the notion of universal design says that people that don't have that disability, who cares? They may not even notice it. I'll give you an example of this from non-web life, from everyday life. A place I don't inhabit real often, but once in a while I stop back just to see how everyone's doing. Outside our door is the room number in Braille. All right, I'm pretty sure. Anyhow, let me go look. This is where I wish there was actually a cameraman that could follow me around. Yeah, sure enough. How many of you noticed that? How many of you noticed the fact that there was Braille there? You may or may not. Why? Well, if you're not blind, you don't need to notice it. Now, does it bother you that it's there even though you're not using it? No. All right? All right? Yet, for people that need it, it's essential. The notion of universal design says we're going to design things to accommodate people with disabilities. Oftentimes, it will also benefit other people, at least in certain situations. Or maybe it will benefit people that have milder forms of that disability. But, worst case scenario, it's not going to bother people that don't have that disability. All right? Does it bother you that an image has an alt attribute even though you don't see it? No. You know, those extra 20 characters don't have any substantial impact on how fast the page loads, on what you see, anything along those lines. Yet, for people that are accessing the web that need those, they're essential. Other sorts of disabilities that impact the person's ability to access the web, other than the ones we've already mentioned. There's at least a couple more.
I don't know a lot about this, but dyslexia?
Dyslexia, absolutely. Dyslexia, and we can add into this other cognitive issues. And I mean, that could include things such as ADD and so on. I don't know if we can lump seizures into that category, but seizures, people that experience seizures. What does seizures? Well, let's do dyslexia first, and then we will dyslexia and other cognitive issues, and then we'll talk about seizures. What is dyslexia, first of all? Okay.
Numeric dyslexia, and there's alphabet dyslexia.
Okay.
And it's just your mind jumbles letters.
Right.
And you can't
Right. Right. The stereotype for people with dyslexia is that they reverse words. All right, but that's not true. The way you said it, the way you described it, that people jumble things, is probably a better way to say it. You might invert letters. You might see letters confused between two letters. For example, you might confuse a lowercase b with a lowercase d. All right. You may invert letters. So if I have the word I can't think of a word. Epson, all right. I may see that as Espen instead of Epson. All right. So it really is sort of an individual thing, and it's not something that's constant. It's not like every single time someone reads something, they see it the same way. It's just that sometimes things get confused. What can we do on our web pages to help people with that?
Link to them doing that with fonts that are used?
Oh,
Certain
yeah.
fonts lend better to them not jumbling?
Yeah, absolutely. The statement was made, do certain fonts work better? And absolutely. Certain fonts, certain font sizes would work better. So pick clear, fairly simple fonts, all right, would be one thing that you could do, all right. And the interesting thing is that would probably also help people that don't have the best eyesight if you have clear fonts. Yes?
serifs in general read easier.
Serifs read easier for people with dyslexia? Fair enough. I guess that makes sense because the serif is sort of an additional cue for someone. All right. That's an excellent point. So your font choice is critical. In addition to the font choice, the font size would be important as well. You don't want to make it too small, or you want to make your page such that it's resizable, so people can size it to the size that works best for them. Anything else you can do?
I would think that if a page has too much
Okay, that's very good. That's true both for dyslexia and for other cognitive abilities, is effective use of white space. Don't jam too much stuff in, all right? Have appropriate space between lines, between words, between sections of the page. Don't have it too cluttered, all right? Would be good for that. That'd also be good for people with ADD, so that there isn't too much going on the page. All right. Anything else that we can think of?
Symbols.
Pardon me?
Use symbols instead of words.
The statement was the student said use symbols instead of words. I'm going to just change that a little bit. Use symbols in addition to words. All right. It's the whole notion of multiple presentations, all right, of the same content. Key element of universal design. All right. There's multiple ways of presenting the door number out there. It's written using standard numerals for people that can see. It's written in Braille for people that are blind. All right. Same information displayed a couple different ways. All right. On a website, you can do that. If, for example, the website was talking about trees, and we have a picture of a tree next to some text about the tree, that will help someone with dyslexia. So in case they see and are confused by it, that image gives them an additional cue. All right? That image gives them an additional cue about what's going on and what's contained in there. Now, at this point you may be thinking, well, this guy's talking out both sides of his mouth, right? He's saying, you have to be careful with images. You don't want to make things cluttered, but here we're having text and an image on the page. Well, that's really the art of web design, is balancing those two things. Balancing, finding just the right amount of content, as was mentioned before. The right balance between image and text. You know that some people can't see the image, that are blind, so you present that information via all attributes. You know that for some people, the fact that there is an image there is going to help them sort out if they're having trouble understanding the text. All right? So that will, again, presenting the same information a couple different ways. Think of the information. We can have the picture of the tree, we can have the alt text for tree, and we can have the text itself that talks about the tree. If someone doesn't have an issue with eyesight or doesn't have an issue with dyslexia or anything like that, they see text about a tree with a picture about a tree. All right? Is that likely going to bother them? Not at all. All right? Not at all. In fact, you could say it makes it more visually appealing for them, makes it more interesting, and so on and so forth. We're not done identifying all the lists of disabilities. All right? We kind of got to here, and I don't even think we've really completely covered these, and we'll talk a little bit more about these. It all comes back to that star, right? I will say that this is very bad on an accessibility level. And we'll talk about why next time. All right? So next time we will polish off by considering some other disabilities that are affected. There's at least a couple more. The cognitive ones and seizures we can talk about more. And there's at least one or two other ones, other big ones that we haven't talked about that we do want to hit. And then we'll talk about some techniques and some specific techniques and some more about the ideas of that. So we'll probably go part of the time on Monday reviewing that, and then we will likely pick up and have some time on Monday devoted to making our layout of our pages more flexible. All right. Good class, great participation. We'll see you over in lab.